quick video on the center vent install for the boost gauge. It's the process of removing the center vent out of the dash and installing a boost gauge into it. Some people had asked about it once I finished it up. But basically, once you pull this dash trim out, this big piece here, there's a video on YouTube if you look up, I think it's Kia Stinger carbon fiber dash or something like that. If you look it up on YouTube, you'll find the removal video for this. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of clips. Feels like you're going to break it the whole time, but it'll be a fun experiment. Once you get it out, there's a bunch of screws. There's one here, there's one here, one here, one there. I think there's 8 total across there. And this thing comes off. Move this to the side. You don't need it. Now, this is the center piece. As you can see, took the center one out already. They are a little bit of a finagle to get out. I originally chose this one for symmetrical reasons, but this is also the cheapest one to replace. This is like $60, and I think these are $85 to replace a piece. So, with the center one, the removal process is the same for the center as it is for the sides, but just to be simple, there's these clips right here. Right there's a clip. You have to pull that out so it's actually going to come towards the camera. And you have to put all those clips outward with a screwdriver, just a little bit of bend, in order to get them to release this. And then this whole assembly, the center vent, the silver trim and everything, just like this, will all pop straight out. I don't have the rear duct on anymore. Rear duct is here, but you have to pop that whole assembly out. Again, these little tabs, there's 4 of them. You're gonna have to bend them out. I put a thin flathead. You can actually go in. I know this is a Phillips, but you'll get the example. Go in under the tab, and then just kind of leave it there to hold it out. Same on this side. And then once you get the two of them next to each other out, you can push, and they'll stay out. And then flip it over and do the same thing, and then it'll pop out. Now what I did, I'm using one of these, let's see, glow shift gauges. If you just take this vent here, if you just take the vent out, again we're talking about the center, but I'm using this as an example. If you take this out, this swivel part here, you cannot retain the swivel. I wanted to, but unfortunately you can't. It would have been cool to make it so you could move the gauge wherever you wanted to, but you can't do that because it actually swivels on the very center piece, and you have to cut the center piece out in order to get the gauge in. If you remove this swivel section, you can see the distance between here and here, this outer part that's just beyond the swivel. It is actually too big to fit the gauge. You would end up having to put a big spacer in there. So what I did was take this back vent piece off. It comes right off, pretty simple once you get it off. It's just these little tabs. It pops right off. Once you get those off, I ended up removing this whole center piece. So it pops off of that center. It can be a bit of a pain, but again, you're not saving any of this. So you can rip that off. At that time, this silver won't be attached anymore, but get this swivel piece out of here, and then cut all these fins off of this up here so that we just have this nice black ring. If you look at this, we have this black ring. This right here, this black ring is the exact same ring as this. So I use that as a filler. Now it looks a little messy back here because I did it with a big caulk gun, but don't let that bother you because you can't see a bit of it once it's in. But take that ring piece, and I put it in. As you can see, it is ever so slightly biased upward. So this is the top here. It says top on it, so you won't get too confused. But I biased this slightly upward because these are kind of downward to begin with. So I gave them a slight bias upward, just like if it was like that. What you can do is once you cut all those fins out, take this ring assembly, put it inside of your little piece so that you have the angle right, and then take a hot glue gun and put a couple dots on it, maybe 3 in a triangle form, to hold it so that you have the right angle, and then fill it in with silicone. You can also put a little bit of silicone around that ring before you put it in, then tack it with the hot glue to make sure it does move. And then be patient and wait whatever the recommended time is for that stuff to harden so that it won't move on the next process. Now what I did, the glow shift comes with this little trim bezel here. See if I can get you in on it. It comes with this little trim bezel, and it fits tight over this, nice and snug. Now that on its own will not work because, as you can see, it just fits in. So I cheated a little bit, and I found a gasket. This is like a O-ring, just out of a kit. It was big enough to fit all the way around it. I'm sure you could do this with a rubber band too. I made my own. You can actually see the split right there, and then I super glued it to that. Now what that does is, we flip this over, put this in the back, it actually gives it a stopping point. So that when you push this in, it stops and holds it nice and firm, because you can see it doesn't fall out. And then that actually stays there. So there's a little scribe on this. It's real small. You can see it. It's hard to see, but I put a scribe right at the top, and then you can actually align the top of this up with the top of that. Now, the way that I have mine set up, again, this inner swivel part that you cut out, I gave it a slight bias to the driver's side so that when you're looking at the gauge isn't facing the back passenger seat. You obviously want to be able to look at it from where you're sitting. You can kind of visualize that in the car if you want to. It was pretty easy. I just gave it a slight bias. It doesn't have to be a ton, but give it a slight bias towards the driver's side. That way when you're actually looking at the gauge, you can see the thing. But as you can see, that O-ring on there makes it so that this doesn't fall out. It stays in there nice and tight. And then once that's in, flip this over. And this is what I'm going to be doing now. I had it hot glued originally so that I could get the principal checked and everything else. With the hot glue, it's going to get very hot in the dash, especially if you run heat. So hot glue is not going to be your go-to. But I'm going to run silicone around this inside landing here, all the way around. That way that's then firm. I would not probably put any on the front side of that seal, unlike this side, because it might ooze out the front, and the last thing you want it to do is see it. You can see here, you can't see any of that orange silicone from the back. But do a bead around there. Again, waiting plenty of time for it to dry. Don't rush it. If you rush it, you're going to cost yourself $100 to buy one of these new ones. So just take your time, silicone it, wait a couple days for it to dry. You can still drive the car without the dash. You'll have to have your stupid push button in order to use it. But you can put the dash back in, the little trim panel, so that you can have that. You don't have to have the stupid vents in. But once you get done, this back tube here, this is the little air guide tube on the back. Once this is dry, ready to go, I took this and I just wing it and cut a couple inches off the back. That is so that you have clearance between where this usually slips in to the vent cluster and there. That is important because when you run your wires, you need a spot to tuck around. Obviously, if this is inside of a vent tube, you're not going to get anything. You could drill a big hole in the side if you want to and run your wires. It's whatever you want to do. I just trimmed it off. So when you go to install this in the car, there's obviously going to be 3 corresponding tubes where the heat comes out, the air conditioning comes out. Take a rag, piece of dense foam, pool noodle, whatever you want, doesn't matter, and fill the tube that would usually blow into this. You don't want hot air blowing on the back of the thing. Obviously, it's not useful, and then it's going to heat the inside of the dash and everything else. So fill that tube with something. Again, rag, foam, whatever you feel best about. If you use a rag, it really does not matter a bit. Put it in there so that the air doesn't come out anymore. And then you'll click this back into here, click the whole assembly back into here, and then put it in the car. When you put this back in the car, this is obviously going to be in the dash piece. Run your wires before you put the trim panel in. Put maybe 1.5 foot extra on there. That way you have it. Then run that through the center and do your gauge and then slip it in. neat trick. Once this is all in, with this gauge in particular, once this is all in, this little trim ring that comes with that shift gauge actually is like a snug slip fit on this. Once you get this in, and it's in the car, you can't remove the gauge, but if you take a pair of pliers and you grab onto this little silver button here, see if I can get it, that little silver button that's used to change your little colors, if you use pliers and just nice and easy wiggle it out and pull it towards you, you can actually grab onto that stupid button and pull it out of there so that you can access the back. Obviously, we don't want to do that unless you actually have to, but that is an option. So run a little extra wire. 2 of these, I don't know which ones, read your instructions. I think yellow is full-time 12 volt, that's how it keeps your color memory. Black is ground, and then one of these is trigger, and one of them is a dimmer. I didn't like the color full brightness, so I actually kept the dimmer attached. If you want to, and I recommend this, strip the wires out, hook it up to something that's 12 volt, be it in the car or whatever option you have, so you can see how bright it is prior to. I didn't want it to be too bright where it's just grabbing a ton of attention, so I ended up just leaving it in the full-time dim mode. Again, if you needed to pull that button out to change that wiring, I suppose you could. If you want it dim, I think you will hook orange and red together. If you don't want it dim, I think you just hook up red, I think, is your trigger wire, your 12 volt remote, whatever. But that's how I did it. If anybody else wants to give it a shot, it's really not that hard. You don't have to buy any pieces. I recommend the glow shift gauge. It's on Amazon. You can buy the one like I did, which is supposed to be a tinted face so that when it's off you don't see it. That is not what I got, but I don't really care. Again, take the dash trim out, pop this piece, that whole assembly out of the center. It's going to be a little hard. Those tabs can be a monster, but take your time. Again, these are a little flimsy, but take your time. Pop the center out, pop this back vent piece off of it, pop the this out. You're probably going to have to be a little mean to it. I think I just diked these little fins so that the whole centerpiece falls off. Take the guts out of the whole thing. All you need is this tube, this silver ring, and this ring here emptied. And then take your black trim piece here, this piece, the little vent swivel, put it back in, give it a little angle up and a little angle to the left towards your driver's side. Glue it a couple spots so that it stays there, and then silicone it in so that it doesn't move. Wait plenty of time for it to cure before you go on to the next step. Take the glow shift ring bezel, which is this little guard trim thing here, put a couple rubber bands around the back edge so that when you put it in there, it feels tight. You'll see what I mean. Do not use tape. If it gets hot, it'll move. You can use tape if you want to, but I give you no guarantees. I put that around there, and then I just siliconed a little ring on. You could probably just use tight rubber bands. That'd be fine too. Push it all the way in so it's nice and snug. Make sure your top on the vent is lined up with the top of the bezel. And then once it's in there, silicone the back, snap everything back together. Cut your little vent a little shorter so you got your wires, leave a little extra, put the dash back in, hook it back up, and go out and enjoy.